Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey, and with me is Moog Machine of TAO and dTAO. And so hello, Moog.
Good evening, good evening. It's a Sunday night. We've been trying to get this sorted out for the last 24 hours as I fell asleep on Friday night listening to you and Nick chatting and hit you up on Twitter to say, hey, maybe you need me again. We've already done this a couple of times, haven't we? So is this number 3 or number 2? It's number 3, isn't it?
It's number 2, I think. I'll have to go back and check, but it might be number 3. I apologize. I've done a lot of
okay.
yeah, but sort of
Which number hash rate are you on now?
I'm not quite at 100, but almost. So this will be 97 or 8, something like that.
I should have waited a couple longer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, I really appreciate you coming on. I mean, you saw the show with Nick. We're obviously very excited, and we're obviously very impressed with the dTAO launch. I mean, I think overall it was a wild success. But there's a lot of points of confusion, as I'm sure you saw also. Nick and I are trying to read the scrolls and scrutinize what's going on. And unless you're really deep in the weeds like you guys are, it's kind of hard for us to figure out what's going on. So you kind of reached out and said, hey, let me explain some of this shit. So thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you very much. I guess one of the nice things to do to start will be to take it back a little bit as to how we got here and why we were here. Because a lot of people have woken up to, hey, check out this dTAO thing on Bittensor. And Bittensor can be a rabbit hole at the best of times to jump into. But if that's the thing that suddenly got your attention peaked as to what is this Bittensor thing, we probably need to step back a little bit and just fill in a small amount of history. Well, we won't go all the way back, but we'll go as far back as subnets. Subnets essentially being mini ecosystems within Bittensor, each one having its own purpose, its own value, its own code base, its own team, its own set of miners and validators producing something of value or of use to the participants. And the way that those were valued in the past was the validators. The validators in the early days of Bittensor were very, very involved in the direction of network, and they would assign value, set weights, and based on the amount of delegated stake, so essentially how many members of the public said, hey, we back you, their weight, their opinion had a greater weight. In the early days, this was fantastic. It meant the participants and those who had a lot of skin in the game could really decide on the direction of the network. But the problem is, as time went on, validators became involved in developing subnets, in having preferences, in becoming overwhelmed at the sheer number of subnets. I mean, this got to 64. At maybe not having the expertise to get into the code base quickly enough, maybe not being able to be as reactive and fluid in changing their weights, their opinions, because it's very difficult. You're setting essentially scoring that's enabling companies to make tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars. You don't just want to randomly change it on a Friday because some guy on Discord told you something, and yet at the same time, maybe you do. So this was a flawed system as the network grew.
Because you have nepotism, effectively, right? That just started developing, like it does in every human thing, right? You have like a deep state that arises, right? That starts colluding with each other.
It was always good to have the people had opinions. It was commented on that I had an opinion that didn't align with other people, and other people had an opinion that didn't align with me. But when we all came together and we used Yuma consensus, this way of essentially assigning weight based on the people that back up our opinions, or the stake we had, skin in the game, it did actually. Now we look at dTAO, we weren't far off. It wasn't bad.
But no, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. It wasn't terrible.
No, it was not future-proof, and it didn't employ sort of natural market dynamics. And so over a year ago, this dTAO concept was first thought out. And it essentially allows everybody to decide the value, but not without a risk-reward scenario. So you must swap your TAO for tokens in each subnet. If the value of that subnet increases, the value of that token against TAO increases. If you swap back, you end up with more TAO than you started with. And likewise, if the value goes down, you lose value against TAO and you have more TAO than when you went in. Essentially, very similar and easy to equate to buying an L2 on Ethereum or any other blockchain. You need to get ETH in order to get involved in it. And back in the early ICO phase, for instance. And that's the long and short of it. But what that then, so if we sort of fast forward to now and this has been launched and everybody's sort of jumping in and go, whoa, what's going on here? What's something should I get involved in? What are the prices? How am I going to make money? This was, in the true spirit of Bittensor, a fair launch. But as in the early days of Bittensor, and with anything normally in these sort of cryptographic realms, the rules are fixed, but in the early days, due to essentially a cold start phenomenon, there's going to be a fairly Wild West scenario in the very early days. And we had a year to think about this, to plan scenarios, see what would happen. But the truth is, no one really knew what would happen because it depended on how people reacted. You could ask this question of how much TAO are people prepared to throw into a fire in order to essentially secure potential future earnings. Everyone kept their cards quite close to their chest.
I noticed that. All the big brains in the Bittensor universe were not talking about what they were doing, like for the most part, right? And I was like, why is that?
It was incredibly competitive. The general public way of looking at things was, look, if you don't know exactly what you're doing, don't do anything because you may risk TAO. Or if you don't know what you're doing and you're not prepared to play with something that you could lose, don't get involved because this is going to be like aping into a low liquidity token launch and it's going to be very, very volatile. And the reality was we also understood that it was advantageous if you were the owner of these subnets to essentially, I keep using the word throw TAO into the fire, essentially buy your subnet tokens and acquire them well over the market price in order to secure emissions, momentum, a publicly viewable position being higher up the rankings. And that would be worth it in the long term, provided, in my opinion, you also have a valuable product to back that up. I mean, I believe there will be examples that we will look at in a few months' time where we'll say, look, they boosted their token price and look where it got them, nowhere because they haven't delivered on the product. But at the moment, and especially in the early days, it was always going to show, well, we initially thought very large returns for those on root. So root is the old form of delegation. It's I'm not going to do anything. I delegate to root. And although my validator, who I choose, earns tokens in all the different subnets that they're on, they all get converted back to TAO, and I get my rewards in TAO. The average root return pre-dTAO was, let's say, 15 to 18%, give or take.
Yes, I observed that myself. My average has been 16%. So yes,
well, I was going to say 16, but they are. And because of the way the mechanism works and rebalances the TAO, what happened was, because a lot of people were spending a lot of TAO for a very small amount of alpha, essentially incurring mass slippage and imbalance in these pools, what happened is, and we knew this would happen, in the first 72 hours, and still now, root dividends were incredibly high. People were getting, I think at some point, 70, 80% APR. Now, we use the word APR. I have to be very, very careful on this. APR is a yearly calculation. When someone
you don't get that right away. You don't get 70%
APR. They're saying this day, if I got for 365 days what I made today, it would be 70% APR. There's a point I had 80% APR for about a 2-hour period, but then it was down to 70, 60, 50. I've seen some things now where people talk about 40, 30. What are we now? We're now 1 week and 2 days into this. It's still higher than it was before because people are still acquiring a lot of these tokens, but it is now starting to settle.
What is it right now, sort of on average? Is it like 40%, something like that?
I have been very careful in making these assumptions. It's somewhere around 40.
Okay.
But it's a difficult one to really 100% say. In the old days, we would just look at it, and we actually, as TAO stats, we essentially would take any account on any validator, look at an account whose TAO hadn't moved in 24 hours, and then see what returns they had. And the only way you could manipulate or change that was through large delegation or undelegation, staking, unstaking events because of something called non-viable stake. So basically, if you went and put on 10K TAO onto my validator, you wouldn't start earning rewards until the end of the next period. So it could be anything from a few hours up to 24 hours. But everybody else on that validator would earn what your TAO was making, which was very nice. There were actually some funny things where people were staking and unstaking TAO and essentially sacrificing their own dividends to boost the APR. APR is an incredibly competitive game amongst the validators.
Okay, let's
change.
Yeah, I want to move into some actual, some real specifics here because I mean, there's a ton of questions I have, but let me just start with the emissions for subnets. So the way, and I'm going to explain to you the way I think I now understand it, which I think is better than the last show because I've done a lot of digging. The way the emissions work, you buy a subnet token for two reasons. One, you think it's a great network and you think the price of that token is going to go up over time. Number two is you like the amount of emissions, the percentage of emissions that subnet is getting, or you believe in the future will have. And so you're sort of betting on price and emissions at the same time. Now, the way emissions work now within the subnet is the network, the Bittensor network, the TAO blockchain emits TAO into the AMN pool for that subnet, and then it emits twice that amount of subnet tokens into the same pool. So the pool is always growing in TAO and subnets of emitted tokens, but the subnet tokens are growing at a 2x ratio, right? So basically it's bleeding the price away of the subnet tokens as expressed in TAO with every block, like just a little bit, it's chipping away. So if you're betting on that subnet, you're betting that more and more people are going to come into it to offset that bleed, right? To drive the subnet token up. So you're sort of betting against the stream. So do I have this right so far? Is that how it works?
Okay, yes and no. Yes, you have it right in the theory. I'm not sure about the 2x. Now, I've been very careful in coming. A lot of things change. So much change in the mechanisms. And so the way I believe it is the first reason you buy an alpha token is because it is worth more in returns on that subnet. So I think I like to think of it this way. TAO is now worth 18% of what it used to be if you hold it in root. And that's actually hard-coded into the chain at the moment. It's a variable that can be changed. So if you look on TAO stats and we look at validators and their stake, you'll see something called TAO weight. And the TAO weight is the weight of your stake, taking into account your root stake and your alpha stake. So if I have 10K on root and I buy 10K of alpha in subnet X, my root weight from that 10K alpha, so my weight from that 10K alpha is 10K. The alpha is worth 10K, it's 10K alpha, it's worth 10K in TAO value. The 10K TAO worth of TAO on root is only worth 1,800, 18%.
Oh.
It's not worth the same anymore. So if you actually go and look at the metagraph on any subnet, whereas TAO stats used to have between 750,000 K of stake, OTF had 720,000. TAO stats now has, I think sometime I was looking yesterday, 180,000. That is the sum of its root weight at 18% and the alpha weight.
Okay.
And what this means is if you buy alpha, if you just stake to root, you will earn across all of the subnets, but not at the same rate that you will earn if you actually acquire the alpha. You acquire much more alpha from actually getting involved and purchasing and acquiring and holding your stake in alpha. That's one of the most important reasons to hold alpha. So while this is one of the reasons that people are getting involved and suffering the slippage, is their goal is to, and most people are being fairly careful with the slippage and they're going in with bots or just very small buys over and over and over and over. Even if they think that the token will slowly go down and it will reach an equilibrium point as the TAO and alpha balance reaches a point, and people think it's about some estimated anywhere between 60 and 90 days. Maybe 60 and 120 days. I think it was estimated longer.
When you say sorry, when you say balance, what does that mean? Does that mean one subnet token equals one TAO? That's like a considered balance?
Where essentially the only thing eating away at the emissions, there's two things eating away at emissions at the moment: root delegation and miners selling. So at the moment, if you take a subnet X, and everybody is in root, so the only no one's bought that subnet token, but all the validators exist on that subnet. What happens is, as the alpha is emitted to each of the validators, the validated portion, it's automatically converted back to TAO and given to them. So it's constant sell pressure within the mechanism every block, because root stakers get TAO, not alpha.
Right.
And this would argue pressure. Yeah.
So this is an important point. So basically, there's on top of the dilution that I talked about earlier, there's the sell pressure. The alpha tokens that are emitted, some portion of them to the miners. I guess. Did you say the miners?
That is the constant downward pressure. It's as the subnet token is emitted into the pool, 18% goes to the subnet owner.
Yep.
Who currently, if they love their subnet, is not selling or moving a single one of them right now.
Right.
41% to the miners,
yes,
who will sell to cover their costs.
Right. They
will sell if they're exploiting a subnet or don't believe in a subnet. But if they like the subnet and they're interested in it and it's actually doing well for them, they're incentivized to sell as little as possible, because sell pressure causes a decline in the emissions of that subnet and therefore the value of what it is that they're making. So miners, there's a balance. But validators, everything that comes into validators essentially gets shared with all the nominators, all the people staking to them.
Right. So that's where my share, as a subnet token holder, I get a piece of the validators pile. Right? Is that correct? So that 41%?
So I'm going to assume that you've been a sensible man and you've only dabbled with 10% of your portfolio into dTAO. And even that's probably I
have not been sensible. No, I've actually dabbled with more, but okay.
So let's say 50-50 then in that case. The 50 you've still got in root, it's being sold on every single subnet that your validator, I'm going to assume you're a wise man and you're with TAO stats. Actually, I know you're not, but it's okay. Yeah. Whoever your validator may be, those alpha tokens, the moment that they're emitted, they are sold. This mechanism was left to the very last minute. It was actually argued back and forward even while the vote was going on, because there were positives and negatives to this. What we wanted, or one of the things that was spoken about, sorry, it wasn't argued before the vote, was that there was an idea for all emissions to stay in alpha, not to have that constant sell pressure, and you as a delegator would have to come and claim them. The reasons more technical as to why that should or could happen, why it didn't. It's a possibility that this will be added in as an option in the future, so you can choose to have them automatically sold back, or you can choose to wait and claim them. As validators, I actually get to experience the other side of that, because as a validator, we earn commissions in alpha tokens as well. If you delegate or buy alpha through us, then we earn in that subnet. So we actually essentially experience that I have a basket of alpha growing on the validator, and I have to decide what I do with it. I consider it the new meta of me setting weights or show. Anyway, I'll get to that in a minute. So what's happening is you are earning proportionally more alpha for any subnet that you've actually gone and acquired that token. First of all, you are acquiring the alpha, and your stake is growing in that alpha. But even if your alpha wasn't being switched back to TAO, you're making more from holding the subnet token. It's worth more. Your TAO weight or your weight in that subnet means that you're earning more, essentially.
So how do I calculate? This is one of the things that's been really confusing, actually, both for Nick and I.
How do you calculate how much you're making?
Right. Exactly. Like what we know some of the numbers, right? So I know that one subnet I'm in Targon. It's roughly 12% of all emissions go to Targon, right? At the moment. So okay, know what that is. Know how much alpha I own, right? Know how much alpha there is in supply, right? At any given moment. So I know what my percentage take of the total should be. I should be pro rata based on how much alpha I own versus the circulating supply. And I know that I'm coming somehow out of that 41%, right? So I should be able to do all the calculations, right? And if I know how much of that, I don't know how much of that 41% I'm getting. So that's a bit mysterious.
Well,
how do I calculate this? How can I find out what's going on?
The story behind me making TAO stats was literally this from the early days of validation. So if you really wanted to know, and any liquidity provision, staking, anything I've ever done where there's a constant output and some auto compounding, I've got an Excel spreadsheet. I've got in a column how much I bought, how much I paid for it, the price at the time, how many of the token I got. And every day I obsessively go in there and make a new row and see how many I've got the next day. And offset if I bought or sold any, so that doesn't affect it. So I can actually see how much I'm making. And I've got a column. Now, okay, apologies, give us 2 weeks and we'll have this on TAO Stats. On the TAO Stats dashboard, we will have the full ability and also for you to go back into historic data to see your buys and your sells, your profits on those buys and those sells, the accumulation, the APR you're making on each subnet on any given day or any given period. It's been a journey to get to the point where we had all the data correct. We essentially had to rebuild TAO Stats in 3 weeks. I could half of me could say we were complacent in never quite putting the pedal fully to the floor, and until Kant said, how long is it going to take you guys to be ready? Because I want to launch this. And the reason being is because the code base was changing. A lot of the applications we were building, the design, the UX for them, was still on the table as to where things would go and what we wanted to build, which is why within TAO Stats, we have two completely different ways of managing your alpha. We have the normal terminal window within the Subnets page where you can buy and sell any singular alpha, including root. So if you just want to unstake or stake your old stuff. And then we have this slider app, which has a lot to be updated and in a great future, but was very confusing to people. But this was designed and built around the concept that everyone will be earning a lot of dust and would need to easily be able to rebalance. So our dust airdrops would be earning alpha on every single subnet and would need to rebalance that. For me as a validator, that particular application has been a lifesaver because balancing 64 subnets worth of alpha has been fun to say the least. But it's also been some really hands-on testing with my team, because getting that to work then with every wallet update, with every plugin, so Polka.js, Nova, Talisman, the Bittensor extension, and then with Ledger. And it's impossible to test these things until they go live, because the wallets hadn't updated their infrastructure. It's the beauty.
Yeah, I experienced that. The Chrome wallet, I couldn't unstake my TAO to participate in dTAO for like 2 days. And then I did
Polka.js has been really reliable, but I get it. A lot of people don't want to just stick their wallet into the browser. Obviously transfer to a wallet that's your aping playing wallet and keep that separate. And because you are going to have to compromise a bit of your. So I personally wouldn't be using my Ledger wallet to be aping in and out of dTAO, but there are members of my team that are. And Ledger was working. It took us 24, 36 hours to get Ledger working properly. On launch, suddenly people just, Ledger's not working. And a lot of the front-end team who actually built this delegation, that incredibly talented front-end team, didn't come from a crypto background. And we had a call. He said, you're going to have to tell me a little bit more about this Ledger device. It took him 12 hours to get it working. So,
yeah. Okay. So, I think your answer to my original question basically is, You've got sort of the basics, right? But there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more weights and dials and knobs and things. So you can't just do a simple calculation to find out what percentage.
Yes, you can. How much did you pay, and how much did you get? And what is it tomorrow? You'll see how many you earn per day. But you need to check at a fixed period. So every morning at the same time when you wake up, check how much alpha you have.
I can observe it, but I can't calculate it in advance and predict like what it should be. Like, is that true or not? Or am I wrong? Because I've tried to calculate it based on like sort of the simple, things I've given you, and it's always wrong. And I don't know. I'm doing it wrong for some reason. I don't know why.
Past performance is never an indicator of future. But if you were to look at your Targon alpha holdings now, not buy or sell any in the next 24 hours, and come back at this time tomorrow and have a look at your Targon, you'll know how much you made in the last 24 hours.
Yes, but that's observed of past performance, and I understand that's not future performance. But if I know, if I know that Targon's getting 12% of the emissions.
A predictor as to how much alpha will be
Right. Shouldn't I be able to calculate that and kind of know what I'm going to make?
It's going to be dependent on your share of that alpha. Yes.
Yes. Right. My pro rata share, right? So let's just say there's 10,000 tokens. If I own 1,000 of them, I should get 10% of that 12%.
Yes. Yes, there will be a facility to essentially predict the amount of alpha that you will get, but that will also vary slightly on actions of other people. So there's been an interesting phenomenon I observed, which is if people are aping into subnet tokens, then root delegators are making a little bit more. And from what I believe, if people are aping out, so selling with large amounts of slippage. Those that are then left in the pool, although the value of their token goes down, they end up getting accumulating more of that token faster because they have a greater proportion of what's out there. So there are still some things that what we want to do is look at the data, look at it in front of us, and then start to be sure that we can put these values on it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I still find it confusing. I still feel like I can't predict what I'm going to make, which I think that's important.
To the circus.
Yeah, I know. Okay. So
yet we're still buying more of it, aren't we?
The answer is it's complicated. You guys are working on it. And, in a couple of weeks, everything will be a lot clearer. Bottom line. That's sort of the answer.
I don't know if you know much about Explorers, but we have to build indexes for everything. So data has to be indexed, and we have a very complex sort of multi-layer indexing system, which actually served us very well, because if we want to go back and sort of recalculate anything or something changes in the chain dynamics, we can do. And for some of our competitors, it's been actually very difficult for them to get the indexes initially off the ground, and then also to deal with the amount of demand. Our demand for the site, for the pages, for the data has gone up at least fourfold in the last week. So there has been a few days of infrastructure reinforcement, and of course we serve a lot of this data to third-party apps that are building on top of it. So all of the exchanges needed to be supported because they suddenly freaked out, especially ones offering staking products, because there's a chain upgrade, and they're using our RPC endpoints. The queries on the endpoints through the TAO Stats API went through the roof, getting over 1 million queries a day, and that's great. But all of these things have to be put in place, and this is why, as I said to you earlier, I let the team fix what wasn't working and what was inaccurate because we've been inundated with. Wouldn't it be cool to have that? Shouldn't you guys add that? We've had people redesigning our UX on Discord and posting it out there.
It should be like this. Well, I mean, I do think. I mean, look, I'm going to say it to your face because I've said it on other shows.
I've seen it. You have said it to my face online.
So you know where I'm coming from on it. I just want things simpler. God damn it! I love what you're doing, but it's not simple enough, right? Like it's and I know that's hard, and I know it's harder than it's harder than it looks.
To virtuals, you made the comparison to virtuals.
I did,
and I have to be guilty. I am so every day in TAO Stats. So I never had time to play with virtuals. I felt to myself that I'm going to have to go on there and make an account now to see what Mark was talking about.
Yeah, it's dumb. It's totally dumb, but it's totally clear, right? And it's like this little AOL produced. It's like it's like what you guys are doing, but super dumbed down, right? So and as a result, they've had some of their subnets. They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, which is crazy, right? And you guys are doing better work, much more serious, much more deep AI. And much more real products, and they're doing basically meme coins with mouths.
I'll tell you why. I feel like other people can build simplified apps. We're not trying to build a trading app or an easy to ape in. TAO Stats is the source of truth and the blockchain explorer for Bittensor. But because Bittensor is so much more complex than just here are some accounts and transactions, we've had to do more, and we knew we were the team that had the infrastructure to best enable you quickly to get into a dTAO, and that the testament to that is you see the amount of alpha that was put through TAO Stats in the early days. And I want other people to build maybe easier applications, portfolio apps. And all we've done is we've taken the headache out of that with the API to say, hey, guys, you don't have to run the infrastructure. We'll run the chain indexing and do all of that, make sure that the data is correct. Go and build something cool. Go and build something different, please.
Yeah.
We are also building it, but we're trying to build more serious tools that have everything. I'll take on board the criticism. I think within the personal dashboard that we have, the dash.tau stats, we're going to build that up as a more user-centric application. Whereas tau stats main just needs to have all the data. The user dash will allow you to add just what you want and have a simplified version and allow you just to buy and sell and move in and out of things.
Let's talk now about the alpha token price mechanism. So what determines, Nick has been basically posting about this nonstop for the last 24 hours. He was on the last show. And he's basically like, look, I can't figure out how price is determined, but because it does not seem to be reflective of the circulating supply. It seems to be reflective of the ratio of tau to alpha token only within the AMM's pool, liquidity pool. Now, is that true? And like how is the price determined?
No, it's the price. It's the number of alpha in circulation.
So you're saying it's
sorry.
You're saying it's based on circulating supply, not just on what's in the pool.
There's a lot of maths in the white paper. Obviously, the exact mechanism for calculating the price, I'm going to defer on. I know it's because it's on the chain. It's within the maths and the code on the chain, which is open source. My team have dissected it, and for me, it's defined by the demand within the pool. So yes, the alpha in the pool, the alpha being emitted into the pool. Yeah, if I was going to, without authority and having the maths in front of me, it's based on the ratio between the alpha and tau in the pool and demand for that alpha.
And the pools are a little odd to my eyes in the sense that they're wildly out of balance, right? So it's very different from like Uniswap, where the pools are always 50-50 in balance. At least that's my understanding.
That's because you look at the current circulating supply, there's less than 1% of most of the tokens. It's very, very early days, and because it's a fair launch, there's only a very small amount of alpha, but because everyone is trying to ape in, there is a disproportional amount of tau because people are putting tau into the pools to buy that alpha at heavily inflated prices, essentially keeping that balance of tau higher, it will increase over time, but it's going to take a little bit of time because the alpha emissions come through chain emissions. The chain emits the alpha.
Yeah, so you can't speed that up. It's just whatever the chain emits at and you shouldn't, because you want everything nice and orderly. So we're in this sort of wild, crazy period right now. Is it wise to participate at all, or is it? I mean, you're participating, right?
It was shown to be very wise in the first 3 days. And then you had some very wise people who sold a lot of alpha. Pre-dTAO, I predicted we would have some big parabolas that would slowly start to even themselves out. We've had the big one. We've had a nice old drop. Everything was up 300%, and then suddenly someone pulled the trigger, and everyone pulled the trigger as a result. I've been trying to stay away from the prices, but now I can't. I'm going to have to now check the prices.
We're down a little bit today, but
but it's more about the shape. I want to check the shape very quickly, so I'm just going to go and have a quick look so I can comment on that on something like 19. So we are evening out. I'm looking at the hourly now. It's starting to even out. Normally, I would imagine this week will start to come up again. You can see we've just kind of leveled out, but where we've leveled out, and if you look at most subnets, they follow the same pattern. The price and the size of the buys may be different, but the overall pattern is the same, which shows that people are getting involved and buying and selling subnet tokens within the same patterns. There's more buys on the more popular ones, but in the same ilk, there's more sells on those, and because there's more liquidity. And now you understand also why it was heavily advantageous for a lot of subnet owners to acquire or pump a lot of tau into their pools early on, because it provided that liquidity. And also with the EMA was set to be much slower on launch to stop heavy manipulation of prices. So
wait. Let me stop you there. So EMA, that's a really important concept. I just figured this out like a day ago. Yeah. So one of the things Nick is the guy who sort of digs into the numbers, and he's basically like the price of this token just went way up. So why is
but
the
the emissions
percentage?
didn't.
Why the emissions? Yeah, why are the emissions the same? They shouldn't be, right?
This was done on purpose with an EMA
Yes.
to stop mass manipulation through large buys. So you couldn't manipulate because actually then.
So what is it? It's an average. So you're not basically going. The percentage is not based on the price at that moment. The percentage is based on a price over time,
Yes.
like a moving average, right? I think is what
Yes.
this stands for. So yeah, okay.
It takes
Right.
time for the emissions to catch up, and the emissions is a reflection of the overall price trend, not an immediate reaction to every buy and sell. So within TAO stats, we order by market cap. But if you order by market cap, the price, although it seems to be pretty in line now, the emissions don't always tie in with the price. So you may have a token that's jumped quite high, excuse me, but the emissions are still settled where they were before this, and it's taken, and some people think it's a bit too slow. It's been a bit too slow because what it allows is momentum. So there are subnets. I don't think it's out of place to say this because they were doing it on the live stream at the launch. Manifold Labs had a team of Sydney and Caro said these are my quants, and they were all there like a lunar launch pad, Houston Mission Control. I think running scripts to acquire the alpha of Targon at a rate that was acceptable to really provide that momentum. It's quite interesting because it's very different. I find it very interesting to watch the Shoots Targon battle because Shoots were not doing that. It's just not what they were. They're very different backgrounds in the teams and very different skill sets. If anything, Shoots team were in Discord to us saying like, "Well, what should we be doing with this alpha? How would we know what?" And they were very happy to sit back and watch and see what happened. So a lot of the Shoots momentum comes from public sentiment, and obviously the Targon too. But there was some, ignition, and we knew this. I remember people saying to me at the beginning, which subnets are you backing? And I would say my personal preferences, and I'd say Targon, or why? And obviously for full discussion, I have a stake in 19, which is essentially a direct competitor to Targon. I believe 19 has more value. I would do. That's my bias. Targon being the competitor, though, there was absolutely no way I was not going to have alpha in Targon because I knew full well that Caro is a worthy adversary. I think that's the best way I can say it, and would put his skill and ingenuity into doing the best for his subnet. And so, it was definitely, and I didn't doubt his skill set. So I'm interested to see how this starts to then play out. But this then brings me on to the next, my next thing, which is really what I wanted. I want a lot of people who are thinking about dTAO to understand. This is all very exciting. And the best part of this is the mechanism works. So you can take our hats off because he takes a lot of slack for this, Cons Jacob, who built and designed this with the help of a number of other people. And he got a huge amount of pressure from this, but it works. It hasn't fallen over. But now that's happened, this was designed to allow us to be a part of judging and taking part in the assignment of value of subnets based on their actual perceived value. So now, once this initial roller coaster, Wild West, everything's going a bit up and down, there are people trading in, out, just taking advantage, and it's usually people who have knowledge of these nascent systems and liquidity pools. Now, let's get back to building. Because now let's get back to really understanding where subnet value lies. Because, of course, dTAO launched and all subnets have gone on a marketing offensive. It's been fantastic. We've never been able to find out as much about subnets as we do now. They're all suddenly launching their products, getting up there, discussing their revenue, and it's great.
Got to sing for your supper now. It's all new.
It is, but it's new to you. It's not new to us as validators. As validators, this was every day. Subnets in our DM saying, "Hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we feel is value," and it's very nice that this can go to everybody else. And what I'm interested actually to see is, after all of this, who actually delivers. Because that's always mattered to me when judging subnets and judging teams. It's not about the team. It's not just about the product. It's not about the idea. You've also got to deliver on your promises. And even then, there've been subnets who have delivered by understanding when they've had limitations in their design and pivoted or evolved. For me, that is delivering in strong teams.
Sure.
And let's see who actually starts to deliver. And so what I start to look at, and which helps for me and my expertise, is the available market for their product, what connections they have, whether they have a revenue model. The meta for 2025 in Bittensor will be alpha stimulation through revenue model. I unfortunately saw your tweet for Subnet 28 lol just before coming on the air, and I sigh with you. But at the same time, so for those that don't know, Subnet 28 was sniped just before the launch, and I believe it was then sold by the person who sniped it to someone who's launched a meme. It's not even a meme coin, is it? It's a meme subnet where they basically said, we're not going to do anything with our subnet. We're not running any AI code, any mechanisms or anything, except the more alpha you have of our token, the more emissions we'll give you. This will, and we sigh and roll our eyes.
I rolled my eyes.
But this will only succeed if the public give it that weight. And the beauty is there should only be 200, and that's assuming there's a miner on each UID, 256 participants who can benefit from this having weight. To everyone else, it now, as far as I'm concerned, is a wart on the side of our network. I hope I don't, it's free market economics, but we expect more from Bittensor. If you want to go and launch a meme coin on Solana, on Pump Fun or whatever, fine. But we have distributed compute. It's a waste of distributed compute. So of course it's going to come, but there will also be, and I've had a couple of subnets who have been in these discussions. Should we change our incentive mechanism to weight the miners for holding alpha, to try and incentivize them to be loyal and faithful? And there will be subnets that start to come up with interesting mechanisms as to how they start to deal with their miners and their validators. And this is what's starting to change now. What the role of validators, what they do. I mean, I'm doing an entire talk, I think, tomorrow, day after, on the future role of validators. It's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
The relationship between subnet owners and validators, subnet owners and miners. And how we're able to sort of view all this in real time and start to understand which teams we think will actually be able to bring value to their subnet, to their ecosystem.
Yeah, I was, the lol thing bummed me out, I have to admit, because on one hand, I've been criticizing you guys saying you're not simple enough. It's all genius stuff and it's all nerd stuff. On the other hand, I love that. Right, because the genius stuff and the nerd stuff is where the hardcore AI cool product, the advancing product, is actually created. Right, I just want there to be sort of a dopier front door for for the masses to come in to actually invest in this world. And because I think the way it is right now. First of all, let me just congratulate you on succeeding at this launch. This was a massive, massive upgrade, and there was a whole bunch of new concepts that had to be put into the UI. You guys did succeed at it. So I have some quibbles with it, but look, success is success. You did succeed.
Letting me know what they are, and we'll change them. It's not a problem.
You did succeed. So congratulations. And we didn't know whether you'd succeed. This could have been a disaster, right? You could have launched it. It could have not worked, right? There were all kinds of other universes, other forks in the timeline that could have happened that did not happen. So you're in the good timeline. So congratulations on that. But I am like you hearing normies coming into the Bittensor world for the very first time on X. So there's a lot of other people I follow for a lot of other different projects, and they're all now like talking about, we have to get into Bittensor. We got to get into these dTAO alpha tokens. It's a little hard, but like it looks like it's going to be worth it. So Francis Dune, I don't know if do you know that guy? Do you know who he is? So anyway, so he's basically Francis Dune Uncensored. So he's like a big, coin, and he's a good one too. I like him. He's very smart. But he basically goes where the hype is, right? So he's sort of, and now his attention has turned strictly on TAO and dTAO, and he's going to be producing podcast episodes on it today, actually, I think, sort of telling all of his followers, like, here's how things work. This is how you get into it. So I'm seeing that those people move, their eye of Sauron has now swung on you. That's good. So you are pulling the attention.
But they now have to say that what they're not ready for is, let's get into detail, but we now have to understand subnets. We have to understand what they do and understand how to define value. And, there was always my thing investing in blockchain in 2017, 18, 19. I like to find projects that I understood the sector, the industry, and it was things that I'd worked in before. So decentralized ticketing, supply chain. A lot of my early investments were things I really understood. Actually, it didn't mean they always worked or not, but being able to understand that I believe, and this is why I'm so passionate about Bittensor, is it has the highest chance of allowing real success and value creation to be rewarded in an incentivized network, rather than just shouting louder, making a bunch of promises, not delivering, and moving on to your next token launch. If the market dynamics play out the way they're designed, which I do believe they will. And I would quite like to get through these next 60 days to get there. And also another thing at the moment is it's very difficult to launch new subnets. What we have to understand now is subnets, in the past, the registration fee, although it was much higher, was locked up, which meant if your subnet got deregistered, which you could also do yourself if it failed, you got those funds back again. So other than losing what you would get from delegating it, there was... So
it was less of a fee, more of a stake.
Yeah. A lot of people had VC backing in this. So a VC would come along and say, hey, I've got 2,000 TAO. You can lock it up for your subnet. If your subnet makes money, well, then I'm making on my investment. And should it ever go to shit, I get my 2,000 TAO back. When dTAO went live, everybody got their TAO back. Now, when you register a subnet, you pay those funds. They're recycled back and then re-emitted, but... They're gone. You have to pay them. And currently, the price of registering a subnet is 600. There's been one every single day, and the price doubles and then diminishes slowly over time. But if there's a subnet launch, there's only allowed to be one every day, every 7,200 blocks. And currently, there's been one on the block, which means people are now throwing 650 TAO into registering a subnet. Which, for those who don't want to do the math, it's just over $250,000. Which you don't get back.
Yeah. So and I have seen these things launching, and like they're very mysterious. Like they don't. It's like Subnet 73, like, and there's no name, or it just says unknown.
It's 65. It's a decentralized VPN. We'll give them a shout out because they just asked to be identified. But a lot of them have just been securing the slots, and there are a lot of subnets that have been waiting to launch that didn't want to go after the VC backing and just wanted to get live. We as an enterprise have two subnets that are literally ready to go, and we would grab the slots. I'm not paying, or we're not paying 650 TAO for it. That's an entire marketing budget. That's the stimulating the growth of your alpha token budget. That's paying your team for a month or so. So, it's they're decisions that need to be made. But as time goes on and it starts to settle, this should come down now to a more accessible value. And we could even see a secondary market in subnet slots, because now there's no deregistration. And there are a lot of subnets that, if I'm honest, are probably not going to make it of the existing 64. There may come a time where teams say, hey, we're not going to make it. We're not getting any more emissions. Should we just sell our subnet slot?
Yes. Yeah. So just to be really clear, anybody can come along right now and register a subnet. There is no Council of 12 approving or disapproving. Nothing. It's fully permissionless. You just have to pay the money.
Yeah,
pay the money, you're in,
and get your registration into that block. So we've been watching the registration blocks, and there've been about between 6 and 8 participants all trying to register on that block at the block. So it's incredibly.
I see. Okay, right. So for the numerical slot, people are competing for that. For number 75 or whatever.
Yeah, other than 69, I don't think people cared about the number. They just cared about getting it for. And I spoke about this on a podcast last week. At that time, I thought the price would come down to around 200 or 300, and people would start to pull the trigger. It actually dropped a lot quicker than a lot of us anticipated. I think everyone was caught with their pants down because suddenly it was 34 TAO because it was set to such a high value. While the vote was going on to stop registrations. When dTAO was switched on, it started falling from 16,000 or something like that. It was way too high. No one was going to register that. But suddenly, when no one was looking, it was 34. The first one was registered for 34. And I think someone must have just sort of looked and done that. Next one was 70. The next one was 140 or something along there, 280. Now we're up to, I think somewhere around 600 now.
Yeah, okay. All right. So the next 60 days are really sort of when we expect things to sort of mellow out. Is that more or less the case?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I think we've gone through the initial mayhem, and it actually was much quicker and more orderly than people thought. A lot more funds have flowed into dTAO, into the alpha tokens than anyone thought. If you look on the Validators page on TAO stats, we have a metric that we're using a lot now, which is a bar graph that shows the ratio between root and alpha. So on TAO stats, which has the highest one, we have 16% of all of our delegation is in alpha. That's way more than and last week at the height of the craze, it was over 25, almost 30%. That's a huge amount. I did not think that we would have more than 15% in alpha after a month. I felt people would be very, very shy because of the risk reward. And I still think people should be cautious, but they should. I feel that's a good 10 to 15% is probably a good amount of a portfolio to be investing, unless you're literally following and just trading or making automation, because it is a slow switch over. You want to be accumulating alpha, but with caution. I'm not the one to give financial advice, so I wouldn't give financial advice on a live podcast. But I do still feel that caution, but getting skin in the game. It's always, I think it's the same with all of these investments, isn't it? The earlier you are, the more you stand to profit, but at the same time, don't let that blind you to the reality of the choices that you're making. Yeah,
you're probably going to get mowed down. Bottom line, 90% of the time. Yeah. But if you don't get mowed down, you might make 100x. So at 100x
actually echoes my getting into Bittensor. I found out about Bittensor from a tweet by Dred Bongo, which sent the price from $12 up to $30. And I looked at it and got really into Bittensor, but held off on my buying because I looked at it and think, well, if I've just read this tweet, so has everybody else. Price has gone up as a result of this. Obviously, the current market, we're stuck in a very interesting market scenario. No one quite knows what's going to happen with Bitcoin. And of course, everything hangs on that. So TAO price has actually been very stable. We've had a nice recovery again. BTC is just sitting there, not quite sure what to do. And a lot depends on that. But subnets have been in a world of their own over the last week or so. So let's see where they go next week.
Yeah. Okay. We're almost done with the hour here, Moog. What else? Is there anything else you want to cover here before we go?
No, I think that's about it. Unless I've missed anything that you feel that I could impart onto your.
No, you had everything on my notes. And listen, I know you did this last minute, so thank you so much for taking some time with us.
My wife will say, I thought you were just going in there for 10 minutes before you came to bed. So why are you getting a coffee? And I'm just going to go to a podcast.
Sorry about that. All right, everybody. Thank you, Moog. My name is Mark Jeffrey. This has been Hash Rate. See you all next time.